The effort to make a better society, the will of the people towards a happy tomorrow, voting. In a rapidly changing world, the strong desire for democracy has constantly improved and evolved our election culture. In particular, the 21st National Assembly elections were meaningful because they protected democratic rights in spite of the difficulties surrounding COVID-19. The valuable right to look at today clearly and vote for tomorrow. The National Election Commission would like to invite you to the heart of democratic elections.
안녕하십니까. 대한민국 중앙선거관리위원회 사무총장 박영수입니다. 대한민국은 코로나19가 전 세계적으로 확산되는 가운데 지난 4월 15일 제21대 국회의원 선거를 실시하였습니다. 우리 위원회는 이번 선거를 공정하고 정확하게 관리하는 한편 최고의 방역이 최선의 선거관리라는 원칙 아래 유권자가 안심하고 투표할 수 있도록 대책을 수립 시행하였으며 유권자의 이해와 협조 속에 선거를 마쳤습니다. 코로나19로 인하여 국제선거참관 프로그램을 취소하게 되어 아쉬웠는데 영상을 통하여 한국의 투개표 등 국회의원 선거 절차 그리고 선거 과정에서의 코로나19 대응 노력을 소개하게 되어 뜻깊게 생각합니다. 여러분의 건강과 행운을 기원합니다. 고맙습니다.
The 21st National Assembly elections are another step towards a better tomorrow. The Republic of Korea holds National Assembly elections to elect 300 National Assembly members every 4 years. The total number of constituency members in the National Assembly is 253, and in these elections, the candidate with the highest number of votes in each constituency is elected. The 47 proportional representation members of the National Assembly are elected according to a closed list submitted by political parties. Therefore, a voter has to cast 2 ballots, 1 ballot for their constituency member and 1 for proportional representation members, making a total of 2 ballots. For the 21st National Assembly elections, Korea introduced a semi-compensatory supplementary proportional representation system in which the number of proportional representation member seats will be decided by the nationwide vote rate for political parties. As this system was introduced, 35 parties in total recommended proportional representation candidates for this election. Also, the voting age was lowered from 19 to 18, therefore expanding the right to vote. Because of this, we could see some high school students at polling stations.
처음 선거라서 뭔가 새롭기도 하고 예전부터도 투표를 해보고 싶었어서 되게 감회가 새로웠습니다.
약간 성인 된 것 같고 약간 그래서 기분이 좀 좋네요. 뿌듯하고 약간 우리나라 국민이 된 것 같고 더 자부심이 좀 느껴져요.
The election day for the National Assembly elections is set according to the Public Official Election Act to prevent the problem of election dates being set by the interests of political parties. The 21st National Assembly elections were held on the first Wednesday after April 9th, which was 50 days before May 29th, the termination date of the current terms of office. Therefore, the election date was April 15th. Then, Shall we have a look at the timeline of the main parts of the election calendar and process of the 21st National Assembly elections in detail? Once the election date is confirmed, the first part of the process is to prepare the voters' list. South Korea manages citizens' information from the birth to death through the digital resident registration system. The voters' list is prepared by the head of each gu-shi-gun, according to this digital resident registration system. Any electorate can freely check the voters' list. Only those registered on the voters' list can vote. For these elections, the number of registered voters who can cast their ballot was 43,994,247 in total, which is 84.9% of the entire population of 51,843,268. Based on this data, 3,508 early voting polling stations and 14,330 Election Day polling stations were set up, as well as 251 counting centers. Candidates who wish to run in National Assembly elections must be 25 years of age or more, as of the election day, and are not disqualified from voting for any reason. For the 21st National Assembly elections, 1,430 candidates registered in total, including 1,118 as candidates in elections for constituency members and 312 candidates in election for proportional representation members. Each party can recommend candidates from among their party membership, and independent politicians can register as candidates if they receive 300 to 500 recommendations from voters. For proportional representation members of the National Assembly, a party can recommend up to 47 candidates. And more than 50% of the candidates put forward must be women. In addition, every odd number on a party's proportional representation candidate list must be women. This is to encourage female participation in politics and raise the rights of women. In the Republic of Korea, candidates must pay a deposit when they register as candidates to prevent a high number of indiscreet candidate registrations. A candidate for constituency member elections must deposit 15 million Korean won. A candidate for proportional representation member elections must deposit 5 million Korean won. This deposit is reimbursed in full, in half, or is lost depending on the result of the election. In the Republic of Korea, we introduced various forms of voting to protect the valuable right of voters and increase the voter convenience and turnout. Early voting is a system that allows people who cannot vote on election day to vote in advance during the early voting period without any registration. Home voting is a system that allows soldiers, police officers, or the disabled who may not be able to go to a polling station to vote from where their place of residence, including at a hospital, care home, or prison.
생존을 하고 있는 동안 유권자라는 그런 사명의식이 있기 때문에 거기에 대한 관심을 부인하들 않지.
There is overseas voting, which allows Korean citizens who permanently live abroad or plan to be abroad during the election period to vote in other countries.
본국에 계시는 우리 국민들과 여기 떨어져 있는 제외 동포들도 다 마음은 한 가지라는 걸 보여주기 위해서 나왔습니다.
The worldwide COVID-19 outbreak had an effect on overseas voting, resulting in the suspension of all overseas elections-related operations at 91 diplomatic missions in 55 countries. As a result, A total of 40,858 voters out of the 171,959 registered overseas voters cast their ballot, a turnout of 23.8%.
코로나19 사태로 인해서 많은 분들의 그 재선거권이 제약된 상황에서 이번에 어렵게 투표를 하시는 분들의 그 선거권은 더욱더 그 가치가 높고 소중하다고 생각할 수가 있습니다. 투표하시는 과정에서 안전과 위생을 위해서 저희 총영선관에서는 최선을 다해서 방역 조치를 하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
There is also shipboard voting for sailors aboard long-haul vessels. In this election, shipboard voting was conducted from April 7th to April 10th for 2,821 sailors aboard 394 ships. But how? How is it possible to vote in the middle of the sea? Because we use a facsimile. First, after the shipboard voting ballot papers are sent to each ship, the voters on board vote and send it back to the relevant sea or DO election commission. The secrecy of the ballot principle is guaranteed by this shield fax. The shield fax seals and prints the ballot papers automatically in the manner that the vote is not visible. To ensure the secrecy of the voter is maintained, the ballot is kept hidden through the shield fax. The ballots sent via the shield fax are sealed in a return envelope sent to the relevant 구-시-군 election commission and counted on the election day together with other ballots. These are the various voting methods used to protect citizens' rights. This is only possible thanks to the variety of election equipment that the Republic of Korea has introduced. Election equipment used in the Republic of Korea can be divided into two categories: early voting equipment and counting equipment. The Republic of Korea has developed ICT technology to fit into election management for voters to participate in the election. Wherever they are conveniently and maintain accuracy. That's why the Integrated Voters List and ballot paper printer were developed. The Integrated Voters List is a system that brings together all voters nationwide into one digitalized list. The information includes names, birth dates, addresses, gender, and if the voter has received a ballot paper, creating the environment needed to be able to allow voters to cast their ballot from anywhere in the country. The designated ballot paper for a voter can be immediately printed on-site through the ballot paper printer, which is connected to the Integrated Voters List.
포함 연구 시스템은 안전성과 보안성을 강화한 선거 전용 통신망을 사용하고 있습니다. 그래서 인터넷 등 외부망과는 철저하게 분리되어 운영되고 있습니다.
Thanks to this convenience, these elections recorded the highest early voting turnout ever since the introduction of the early voting system at 26.69%, despite the COVID-19 crisis. In the Republic of Korea, ballots are not counted in polling stations. Ballot boxes are transferred to counting centers, allowing for more specialized counting. Therefore, there is the possibility of counting taking a long time or going overnight. The ballot sorting machine was invented to increase accuracy and efficiency during the counting process. The ballot sorting is a device that is designed to sort ballots by candidate and party by scanning the mark on the ballot. If there are 6 candidates, a maximum of 340 ballots per minute, 20,400 ballots per hour can be sorted. Therefore, the results of counting can be released on the night of Election Day or early the next morning at the latest. The ballot sorting machine is managed under heavy security. It is not connected to any external communications networks, and therefore it is impossible to manipulate the figures or hack through the internet. If a ballot has more than 2 marks or the marking is unclear, the ballot sorting machine will sort it into a category for requiring a double check. Sorted ballots are checked again using a tabulation machine. The tabulation machine automatically flips and counts the sorted ballots and tabulates them. Then, a member of the counting staff checks the vote marks using the naked eye. In this way, election equipment in the Republic of Korea used in voting and counting serves the role of protecting more people's right to vote and reporting the result accurately and quickly. Six days after candidate registration, each candidate may fully begin their election campaigns until the day before Election Day. Each candidate can give a speech or hold a talk in public spaces, such as streets, squares, markets, and parks, using cars and amplifiers. Also, candidates and election officials can campaign using sashes or other merchandise or hand out name cards for during the election campaign. Election posters and street banners are an example of election campaigning. Sometimes, candidates are invited to debates and discussions during the campaign election period. TV debates are a good opportunity for voters to compare and evaluate the qualifications and policies of the candidates.
안녕하시고 민주당의 주진영 후보자께서 지금 발언하십니다.
In this National Assembly election, there were noticeable new forms of election campaigning due to the impact of COVID-19. Such as volunteering to disinfect areas. To minimize face-to-face contact, online election campaigning became more active. Early voting was conducted for 2 days on April 10th and 11th. With no prior registration required, it was possible to vote at any of the 3,508 early voting polling stations set up nationwide. From the dawn right before the voting began, the early voting polling stations looked busy. Since these elections were held amid the spread of COVID-19, the public interest in the elections was significant. Special safety response measures prepared in response to COVID-19 were there for this election. All voters and election officials followed the code of conduct and did their best to create a safe voting environment. When voters came to a polling station, they had to wear a mask and keep a 1-meter distance with other voters. Before entering the polling station, all voters needed to have their temperature checked. With the sanitizer provided, voters had to sanitize their hands and wear disposable vinyl gloves.
코로나 때문에 이제 선거일 날은 사람들이 너무 많을 것 같아서 미리 사전 투표를 하려고 마음을 먹었고요. 코로나 예방 차원에서 간격 만들어 놓은 것도 좋았고, 그리고 손 소독하고 비닐장갑 끼는 것까지.
Polling hours for early voting were 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., the same as Election Day. Then, let's take a look at the early voting process. First, the voter had to show their ID card and have their identity verified, and put a fingerprint or signature on the electronic pad to confirm they have voted, and received 2 ballot papers. The NEC encouraged voters to sign rather than put a fingerprint during this election to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The procedures for early voting run differently for voters casting their ballot within their registered district and those casting outside, unlike voting on Election Day. First, let's go through the process for voters casting their ballot inside their registered district. Voters casting their ballot inside their registered district followed the normal election process by having their ID checked, receiving their ballots, marking their ballots, and putting them in the ballot box. For voters casting their ballot outside their registered district, the voting procedure was the same. They had to put the ballots in a return envelope, seal it, and put the envelopes in the ballot box before they left the polling station. "6 p.m. Early voting is complete." How will the early voting ballots be stored until counting on Election Day? Early voting ballot boxes with ballots from voters casting their ballot within their registered district are sealed and stored in a special location with surveillance cameras in the Election Commission office. The Integrated Control Center in the NEC Election Situation Room monitors the stored ballot boxes 24 hours a day. Ballot boxes with ballots from voters casting their ballot outside their registered district are opened under the supervision of observers. Then the number of return envelopes are counted and are handed over to the post office to be sent to the relevant election commission. When the return envelopes arrive at the relevant election commission, they are stored in mail ballot boxes in the commission office. The early voting ballots that hold the valuable public opinion are stored under strict security. And going to be transferred and counted together with other ballots on Election Day. Finally, the 21st National Assembly Elections Day arrived. Polling stations were installed in locations where voters can visit conveniently, such as schools, district offices, government buildings, public organization or institution buildings, and community service centers. In a polling station, a voters list comparison section, ballot paper issuing section, polling booth, and ballot box are installed. At each section, election officials were deployed for transparent and fair election management. Polling station managers were appointed from civil servants and school personnel, and polling staff consist of civil servants, school personnel, and were from among the general public. The voting started with thorough preparation to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Like the early voting, all voters wore a mask, had their temperature checked, sanitized their hands, and wore disposable vinyl gloves before entering a polling station. With the cooperation of election officials and voters, the voting went smoothly. Now, shall we look at the voting procedures in detail? All procedures of voting were supervised by voting observers recommended by parties and candidates. Voters were only allowed to cast their ballot at the designated polling station according to their registered address. Voters needed to visit the polling station, having their identification verified, and sign the voters list. After the ID check, voters received ballot papers. Voters marked their ballot in the polling booth, put it in a ballot box, and left the polling station. However, it was illegal to take a photo of a ballot in a polling booth. People were allowed to take a picture at the photo zone in front of the polling station or take a selfie that proved they voted using the polling station sign. All Korean citizens have the right to vote. The NEC has been putting efforts to protect the suffrage of disabled voters in various ways. There was an ARS voice voting information service for the visually impaired, and sign language interpreters were available in polling stations for the hearing impaired. And for the mobility impaired and voters in an area with a traffic inconvenience, polling station shuttles were also available.
같은 경우에 코로나19 때문에 투표하는 방법이 좀 다른 때보다는 좀 어렵긴 하지만 뭐 여기 안내자들이 친절하게 잘 안내해줘서 별 무리 없이 잘했어요.
At 6 p.m. after the voting ended, the polling station managers closed and sealed the ballot boxes and delivered them to counting centers accompanied by voting observers and police officers. Then, it was time to open citizens' hopes and dreams. In a tense atmosphere, ballot boxes arrived at the counting centers. From that moment, all counting staff at each section were busy preparing the counting procedure that gathered the public's voice. Counting staff who contributed to the credibility and transparency of the counting process were appointed from among government offices, schools, banks, or public institutions who are considered fair and neutral.
중앙선거관리위원회는 코로나19 확산을 예방 차단하고 개표 사무 관계자들이 안전하게 개표에 전념할 수 있도록 특별 관리 대책을 마련하였습니다.
Of course, the NEC prepared COVID-19 response measures in counting as well. All counting staff followed the COVID-19 Code of Conduct and counted under strict controls. When receiving the ballot boxes from each polling station, the boxes were checked thoroughly for any possible defects at the reception section. The received ballot boxes were stored at a separate place designated in the counting center. When counting preparation was complete, the chairperson of the competent election commission announced the start of counting, and each section served its role in the counting process. What are the procedures?
송파로 선거관리위원회 대표를 시작하겠습니다.
Finally, the counting began. Firstly, at the opening section, they check any defects in ballot boxes. If the boxes were fine, they took out the ballots. Then, ballots were sorted by election type and organized into stacks facing the same, so the ballot sorting machine could sort them easily. The return envelopes that arrived from early voting, mail voting, shipboard voting, and overseas voting are counted together on election day as well. The envelopes were opened using the envelope opener. The ballots were taken out, sorted, and counted. The counting procedure from this point was the same as the normal counting. The ballots sorted at the opening section were passed on to the ballot sorting machine operation section. At the ballot sorting machine operation section, the ballots were classified by candidate and party using the ballot sorting machine. When it found invalid ballots or ballots not clearly marked, they were classified ballots requiring a second check. When the sorting by the ballot sorting machine was complete, a counting report was printed. A certain number of ballots were bound together and delivered to the examination and tabulation section. At the examination and tabulation section, the counting staff checked the ballots sorted by party and candidate one more time and recategorized the ballots categorized as requiring a double check into valid and invalid votes. In this process, the valid ballots are added to the total number of votes for each party and candidate. For a more accurate result, the ballots that went through sorting, check, and double check were confirmed one more time at the counting report check section. The commissioners at the Commissioner Inspection Section inspected the number of votes for each party and candidate and invalid votes. Then, the chairperson announced the ballot count result after checking the results themselves. The counting result announced by the chairperson was recorded at the recording and reporting section prior to releasing it to the media and counting observers. Finally, the counting process finished as the counted ballots were put into boxes and sealed. The NEC put efforts to ensure the public's right to information and show the transparency of the counting process by broadcasting live and disclosing the counting process in real time. The world fell into an unprecedented chaos due to the spread of COVID-19. The Republic of Korea established a large-scale testing system and started to battle the crisis as disclosing the result transparently. The 21st National Assembly election, held in the midst of COVID-19, became everyone's interest and hope.
Well, it's interesting to see a place holding an election in the middle of this COVID pandemic. You know, most other countries are very shut down, so it's interesting to see that people are actually able to come out and vote, and it's interesting to see the safety precautions they're taking with the sanitizer and wearing gloves. So, I think a lot of international audience is interested to see how this turns out for Korea, what kind of turnout there is, and what level of participation.
The NEC initiated various responses to create the safe election environment. Not only the polling station that many people gathered in on election day, but the waiting areas, inside and outside of polling stations, were also thoroughly disinfected.
두 개표소 내 외부 공간에는 초밀입자 살포기 등을 이용한 부유세균 소독을 하며 코로나 바이러스용 환경부 승인 소독제를 사용합니다.
The NEC conducted pandemic prevention education for election officials and ensured they wore a mask and medical gloves. The staff checked all visitors' temperature before they entered the polling station and provided hand sanitizer and disposable vinyl gloves to protect voters' safety. The NEC also set a code of conduct for the voters and made efforts to promote it. We cannot overlook the special election management measures for COVID-19 patients and those in quarantine. The NEC allowed home voting for COVID-19 patients and those in quarantine and set up and operated special early voting stations in 8 care centers where COVID-19 patients were treated. Also, temporary polling booths were prepared for voters with symptoms including a high temperature. Those in quarantine were allowed to cast their ballot on election day after normal voting hours to separate their voting time and route to minimize contact with voters, polling station staff, and observers. Since the Republic of Korea counts ballots at counting centers on election day, the NEC established special measures for counting management as well. 251 counting centers nationwide were disinfected, and all counting staff wore masks and medical gloves. The NEC delivered the necessary items for disinfection to polling stations and counting centers, including 3 million masks, 20,000 thermometers, 1.3 million packs of plastic gloves. The Republic of Korea wrote a new chapter in election history with the general public's active cooperation in social distancing and the election management measures that considered the safety of the public.
이번 선거는 코로나 발생에 따른 어려움이 많았습니다만 철저한 위생관리, 발열자를 위한 임시기표소 마련 등 안심하고 투표할 수 있는 환경을 조성했습니다. 성숙한 시민의식과 선관위의 철저한 준비가 있었기에 이번 선거가 성공적으로 치러지고 있습니다.
The NEC carried out various PR activities to encourage people to participate in voting, to create an election culture together with citizens. and held a special exhibition to raise the awareness of Korea's election history and culture that has changed and evolved through elections. As a result, the turnout for the 21st National Assembly elections was the highest in National Assembly elections for 28 years despite the COVID-19 crisis. What do you think about the variety of voting systems to protect voters' suffrage? The high civic consciousness that allowed democracy to bloom, regardless of the COVID-19 crisis, and the well-rounded response measures put in place by the NEC.
너무 과하다 싶을 정도로 하긴 하지만 이렇게 해가지고 문제는 안 된 것 같아요. 그래서 훨씬 더 좋은 것 같아요.
불편한 점은 없었어요. 뭐 이제 여기에 이제 순서에 따라서 맞게 해주고 이제 그러고서는 이제 비닐장갑 보시다시피 이렇게 끼고 그러고서는 했어요.
We hope the details of the NEC's best efforts to set a new standard in realizing democratic values in an era of rapid changes are a message of hope. The National Election Commission of the Republic of Korea will always be with you all.